federal grand jury launched an investigation into alleged financial crimes involving China-based tech giant Neville Roy Singham, Fox News reported. Notably, the tycoon's wealth allegedly helped bankroll a broad network of socialist, communist, and Marxist groups across the United States over the past decade.
This is not just a story about violence and chaos, as you alluded to, Mr. President. This is a money story. And at the Government Accountability Institute, my colleague and I, Peter Schweitzer and our team, we followed the money, and we followed it to the top of what we call the protest industrial complex, Riot Inc., and we found a network of NGOs. It's not just the Soros network, the Open Society network, it's other funding networks, the Arabella funding network, the Tides funding network, Neville Roy Singham and his network, Foreign Cash, and it's also big left-wing funders. Some of them are not citizens of this country. Mr. Hans-Jörg Wyss of Switzerland. They're pouring money into this entire ecosystem.
A federal grand jury in Manhattan has issued subpoenas as part of an investigation led by U.S. Attorney Jay Clayton's office in the Southern District of New York, and the probe was authorized by Acting United States Attorney General Todd Blanche. The development comes as the Trump administration ramps up efforts to target fraud, money laundering, and other financial crimes in the multi-billion-dollar nonprofit sector. The investigation follows a March Fox News digital report that alleged Singham routed $285 million from Shanghai through a Goldman Sachs philanthropic fund and two shell companies to finance a network of U.S.-based nonprofit groups and activist organizations. Prosecutors are examining whether the flow of funds involved wire fraud, bank fraud, money laundering, or other financial crimes, with the grand jury already issuing subpoenas for bank records and financial documents. Notably, this is not the first time Singham has come under scrutiny. Then, Senator Marco Rubio had previously urged the DOJ to investigate Singham's activities. During a June 3rd hearing, when Representative Luna questioned Secretary of State Rubio about Singham, Rubio revealed key details.
If you could let me know if you are familiar with the name of Neville Roy Singham.
Yeah, he's I think an American millionaire living in China who's funding all of these left-wing radical loons.
Correct. When you were on Senate Intelligence, you had actually sent a letter encouraging the Department of Justice to look into him for a FARA violation. For those people who will see this clip later on the internet, can you just briefly explain what FARA is?
It's the Foreign Agent Registration Act, and it means if you're operating on behalf of a foreign country, you have to register and declare yourself as such.
To provide some context for those looking at this, Mr. Singham's in total given $1.3 million to an organization called Code Pink, as well as over $278 million to various nonprofits since 2017. Secretary Rubio, it's in my opinion, observing what's been happening on both sides, really contributing to the political divide in this country, that many countries are engaging in influencer operations to include psychological operations on the American people with the intent to undermine not just our foreign policy from the administration's perspective, but also to pit us against one another. Would you concur with that statement?
There's no doubt, absolutely.
Are you aware of any countries in particular that are currently engaging in this?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that we see evidence of it from the CCP. We've historically seen some of it as well from Russia historically in the past in a different way. I think you're starting to see some of it from Cuba, and I think some of these are linked with one another. In fact, that group that you just mentioned actually traveled to Cuba, stayed at a very fancy and expensive hotel that is sanctioned, and I think are now being looked at by the appropriate officials to see if they violated U.S. law in the trips that they're taking. But there's no doubt that when you have people showing up with pre-printed signs 24 hours after Nicolas Maduro was arrested and extradited to the United States, that's not an organic movement. Someone's paying for that.
According to the Fox News report, Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent met Goldman Sachs CEO David Solomon in New York and warned that the bank could face scrutiny over its philanthropic fund's role in moving Singham's money through U.S. nonprofits. Like many U.S. firms, Goldman Sachs has maintained long-standing business ties with China. CEO David Solomon even met senior Chinese Communist Party official He Leifeng in 2025. But also notably, David Solomon joined President Donald Trump and senior U.S. officials on a trip to China for meetings with President Xi Jinping and other Chinese leaders. According to a Fox News digital investigative report, Singham's political funding expanded after his 2017 marriage to Code Pink co-founder Jody Evans, who, sources say, is also under investigation. After selling ThoughtWorks for an estimated $785 million in the same year, Singham allegedly began channeling money into activist groups. Fox News digital report said it tracked 223 transactions, moving $591 million through 67 organizations across 5 continents, including a documented $278 million that flowed directly into U.S.-based groups. As the DOJ investigation gets underway, attention is expected to turn to the funding network and whether it was used to spread CCP propaganda, an issue several U.S. senators have repeatedly raised concerns about. Notably, in a heated Senate hearing in February, Senator Hawley exposed how dark money networks, including Neville Roy Singham's network, funded Minnesota protests.
Your organization specializes in following nonprofit funding and organizational networks. So based on your research, what organizations have been active on the ground in Minnesota? What can you tell us?
Yes, we have tracked over $60 million, according to the latest 990 disclosures, to approximately 14 groups, some of them national, others on the ground. Groups like the ACLU provide the legal defense, as well as facilitate the trainings for some of the tactics that Senator Corrin just described. A group named Democracy Forward. Take Action Minnesota has gotten over $10 million from these large NGO networks, including the Neville Roy Singham Network, Indivisible, National Lawyers Guild, CTUL, the Council on American Islamic Relations Minnesota, CARE, Minnesota 350, Voices for Racial Justice, on and on. Like I said, over $60 million just according to the latest 990 disclosures.
$60 million, at least 14 different groups. That sounds like a pretty broad ecosystem here. Where's this money coming from? I mean, how is it flowing to these groups? Do you have any sense? So
we've built a database that contains hundreds of thousands of rows from grants from networks like the Soros Network, the Arabella Funding Network, as mentioned, the Neville Roy Singham Funding Network, many others, Tides, the Ford Foundation Network, the Rockefeller Funding Network, these massive NGOs that have billions of dollars to spend on all kinds of coordinated protest, or in this case, riot activity.
Give us a sense, if you could, of how this money flows to the ground level. You know, how does it get from these various donors and come down to ground level and start funding protests and other violent activity?
It comes in the form of a check, a 6-figure check. That'll come from whether it's the Open Society or the Tides groups, the Singham groups. They'll fund directly some of these on-the-ground organizations. And we've seen this happen time and again. It's not just in Minnesota.
So the money, I think we've got a chart perhaps, the money gets moved around. You just referenced a number of these groups, Arabella Advisors, the Tides groups. These are left-wing dark money groups. So you've got this incredible, I mean, just look at the number of different entities on this one chart, all of this money moving through all of these different groups, many of them, again, non-disclosed donors, right? So we don't know exactly where the donors ultimately come from. Oftentimes the entity that gets the money doesn't have to report where they get the money. So it's washed through multiple times. And what you're saying is your research has found multiple different left-wing groups that are funding these protests on the ground in Minnesota. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, that's absolutely fair. And the foreign money is probably the most concerning, whether it's from Neville Roy Singham or the Swiss billionaire Hans-Jörg Wyss.
Okay, talk about that. Talk about the foreign money, because you've mentioned Singham now a couple of times. There was a New York Post article not long ago talking about Neville Singham, who's based, I think, in China. Tell us what your research has uncovered about this foreign money making its way to American protests that often harm our law enforcement officers.
Sure. So Neville Roy Singham, he's an American citizen. He's an avowed Marxist, and he made nearly $1 billion roughly a decade ago selling his tech company. One of the funds that purchased the tech company had Chinese sovereign wealth money in it. And once he sold that company, again, got close to $1 billion, he now uses that money to fund a variety of protest, riot, anti-Semitic protests, the pro-Hamas things in New York. He funded the LA riots earlier this year. And so he lives in China, is a pro-CCP guy, and he's not done. He's also got very close ties to the communists in Cuba. He finances trips for American groups to go down to Cuba to receive Marxist revolutionary training. They come back here, and then they operate on the ground. Famously, one of the groups in Salt Lake City, the Armed Queers of Salt Lake City, they went down to Cuba and got one of these trips. They're also very anti-ICE and working on these anti-ICE demonstrations.